I had become interested in questions surrounding death and how a community and a person negotiates death for a number of years. By the time my dad was diagnosed with the disease, I had come to the conviction that in large part most of our modern Western churches live, like the rest of society, in a very strong denial of death, trying to make it as invisible as possible, to sanitize it as much as possible, to marginalize people who convey to us the presence of death. At first, my dad was still relatively functional. He needed help walking some, but he could still speak, so he continued to preach at churches he was pastoring in Arizona, where he lived, but he deteriorated very quickly. He was going to understandably continue in the habits that he had acquired as part of our society, which is to live in a terrible fear of dying, and that was going to make it very difficult to die well. And I think that turned out to be the case. But my mom called me at 11:45, something like that, the night of, I think it was March 10th, and just said that he had died 5 minutes before, and it was time to come out. My dad just sat there in his wheelchair for about 3 hours, while my brother and my mom and I and his doctor and his wife sat around waiting for the people from the funeral home to come and get him. We didn't know these people, so it's a totally anonymous exchange. The only thing that connects us is a monetary contract. I mean, isn't there some set of communal bonds in place that we could entrust the care of his body? We didn't have any of that, you know? We didn't have any way of kind of coming to closure with my dad or taking seriously the holiness of his remains from that point on. The next thing we got was a box that was about this big of ashes. For better or for worse, some of our Christian traditions have actually sustained some reasonably good practices for death. And it's not always carried out, but the Roman Catholic tradition provides some very clear practices for how you respond to the death of someone. They're practices that someone didn't just invent somewhere under the fluorescent lights, but are the kind of the deliverance of a community struggling with the reality of death over generations. The Bible talks about our life being one of being conformed to Jesus' death and all of the horror of that death, that central to that claim is learning to die well, and learning even to die difficult deaths well, and not to see death as some kind of strange, interruption that happens at the end, but as something with which your body is wrestling your whole life. And discipleship is about learning to wrestle with the presence of that weakness and that decay as a person, as a community, your whole life long.